The saints in the church in Laodicea, in Revelation chapter 3, had no idea they were lukewarm. They said, we're rich and don't need anything. And then Jesus tells them they're wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. Wow. Talk about being clueless. They had no self-awareness whatsoever. They thought they were fine, but Jesus says he's going to spit them out. What if we are actually just like them? What if we think we're fine, but Jesus thinks we're wretched and pitiable? What if we're actually lukewarm and just don't know it? Could we be just as clueless as the Christians in Laodicea? In my career, I spent more than 3 decades working with organizations, working on things like organizational performance, employee participation and commitment, leadership effectiveness, along with a list of other topics that combined to determine how healthy and successful an organization was. So when I'm a part of any organization or any kind of group, I can't help but notice certain things, certain dynamics that I've seen over the decades that signal that they may be losing their focus, getting off track, becoming lukewarm. And this doesn't happen just in the business world. It can and does happen in churches as well. We only need to read Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 to 22 to see a clear example of that. The church in Laodicea had gotten off track somewhere along the way and had become lukewarm. And Jesus warns them that's not where they want to be. My career gave me the opportunity to live in a number of cities over the years. So I've also had the opportunity to participate in and observe a number of churches. And with some hindsight, I've been able to make a few observations about how these well-intended Christians can so easily fall onto the path of becoming lukewarm. How it sneaks up and envelops them before they even realize it. As a matter of fact, it's a pretty common path. In some ways, it's the standard path that a lot of churches go down. Let me take you down that path, and you can compare to the path your church is going down. Is there any chance that your church is on this path to being lukewarm? Our story starts with a group of sincere Christians that want to start a church. So they do. They rent out some space, maybe a storefront, maybe a local school gymnasium, and they meet there every week. They have to set out the chairs, get the audio system set up, and haul in their instruments if they use them. And then, of course, all that has to be put away when the service is over. So there's pretty much something for everyone to do. Very few have the luxury to just stroll in and take a seat. When we jump forward a few years, they've managed to grow the number of church members and now have a permanent church building of their own. But it hasn't been easy. It took a lot of focus to raise enough money to have the down payment for their new building. And several members had to personally take on some liability for the mortgage they used to make this substantial purchase. But it's been worth it. Now they have a place of their own, so no more having to set up the chairs every Sunday, put up and take down the audio system. Now they just flip the switch and turn it on. What a blessing. Those that were involved from the beginning are proud of what they've done to be able to accomplish this. From just the idea of starting a church to their own well-established place. They are rightfully proud of all that has been accomplished. Step 1 on the road to lukewarm is now complete. They're proud of what they've accomplished. We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's continue down the path. What was once 25 people meeting in a storefront is now several hundred meeting at their well-earned church building. And what once required several of the men to share the preaching duties is now thankfully done by the full-time paid preacher that they can afford now that they've grown their numbers sufficiently. Things have moved along well. But there is a problem. It seems that those who were never a part of those early days where everyone had to work so hard just to meet on Sundays can't quite be satisfied. And candidly, they aren't very patient when you try to explain that to them. There's always someone wanting the preacher to talk more about this or that, or why does he always have to harp on this other topic? Can we go to church just once and not be beat over the head about that? And naturally, with as many people as they've been able to attract to the church, there are some different opinions about what the music service should be like. A few people have actually left to attend another church down the road because they prefer the song service at that church. It's not easy running an organization of a few hundred people. The church leaders spend a lot of their time dealing with issues. Perhaps not doctrinal issues or even salvation issues, but issues nonetheless. They have to be dealt with. And understandably, for the sake of unity and fellowship of the church, effort is expended to keep people satisfied because we're all realistic enough to know that if you don't keep people satisfied, they'll leave. You're not the only church in town, so if you don't keep the members satisfied, you may as well close and lock the doors. Step 2 on the road to lukewarm is now complete. Trying to keep everyone satisfied. Okay, just one more little stop on our path to lukewarm. Remember those days when several men had to share the preaching duties? And you know as well as I do that not all men are cut out to be preachers. Not that we don't appreciate their efforts, but candidly, some of them just weren't good speakers. But that's ancient history. For the last several years, we've been blessed to have a very good preacher. A man of faith that is well studied. A man that knows how to present his thoughts to the congregation in an engaging way. A man that's friendly and welcoming to visitors. No longer are we nervous about inviting someone to church because we weren't confident that the sermon that week would be engaging and uplifting. We're blessed to have the pulpit filled by a very talented and qualified preacher. It's actually hard to think we grew like we did without having him in the pulpit. The third and final step on the road to lukewarm is now complete. Falling in love with your preacher. Let's recap the 3 steps to lukewarm. Being proud of our past accomplishments, keeping the members of the congregation satisfied, admiring our great preacher. Those don't sound like bad things. They actually sound like good things. They sound like blessings from God. That's why they're so dangerous. They don't feel like steps in the wrong direction. They seem like good things. Or at a minimum, neutral things that just happen in the natural progression of a church. So how can these possibly be steps on the road to lukewarm? Because when you line them up, one after the other, they slowly, almost imperceptibly, take our focus off of what it really needs to be on. They shift our focus off of taking the gospel to the world and turn our focus to ourselves. Let me very quickly speak to how each of these 3 steps does this. When we become proud of our past accomplishments, step 1 in our little journey, regardless of how legitimate we think those accomplishments are, we're focused on ourselves, giving ourselves credit for what we've done, instead of giving the credit to God where the credit really belongs. The Bible says pride goes before fall, and that can include a fall into being lukewarm. And my experiences also suggest that this pride in our past accomplishments also has the great temptation of causing us to be looking to the past instead of looking to the future, spending our time admiring what we've accomplished instead of focused on what God still has for us to do. We start driving down the road, spending way too much time looking in the rearview mirror and miss all the opportunities that God is placing in front of us. Step 2 is keeping everyone satisfied. You see, this also gets us focused on the wrong things. We start worrying about whether the pews are comfortable. Why is the auditorium so warm? Can we not afford to run the air conditioner? Don't you think it would be better if we started the Sunday morning service 30 minutes earlier? Are they ever going to fix that pothole at the entrance to the parking lot? I've served in church leadership. I know firsthand how these issues never go away. I know firsthand how easy it is for church leadership to spend all its time dealing with these physical, earthly, personal preference matters, which takes them away from focusing on growing the church spiritually and maturing in our holiness. I hope you can understand that this is a pathway to lukewarm. And finally, number 3, admiring our preacher. That admiration too often turns into reliance and sometimes into idolization. The whole of the church starts to center around the preacher. He becomes the key funnel through which everything has to flow. We think nothing is going to work unless he's involved somehow. And too often, human pride once again kicks in and the preacher starts to have an elevated view of himself, just making this bottleneck that everything has to go through him all that much worse. So we fall into this trap of most of the members coming to church, listening to the great sermon, and doing very little of anything else to further the gospel. The admired preacher actually serves as a catalyst for everyone to discount their own abilities and responsibilities. So when you put these 3 steps together, you've got a lukewarm church. And just like the church in Laodicea, they don't realize it. They think they're good, have everything they need, but over the course of time, they've completely lost focus. Slowly, imperceptibly, they've become internally focused, proud of what they've accomplished, working hard to keep everyone satisfied, and running everything through the great preacher, who is so critical to the church's future. Going through the motions, but not actually growing. Don't assume your church isn't lukewarm. Don't assume you're not lukewarm. Satan is clever. Jesus said he's the father of lies. Satan would love for us to believe the lie that we are just fine, in need of nothing, when Jesus' assessment of us is that we're wretched and pitiable and poor and blind and naked. Just because we don't feel lukewarm doesn't mean we aren't. The church in Laodicea didn't think they were lukewarm either. A little something to think about. Thanks for listening. God bless you on your journey.